Okay, so when I was about, I can't remember, 12 or 14, my parents bought a hobby farm in St. Bonnie, Minnesota, which is about 15 miles, 12, 15 miles west of Mound. And the reason they call it a hobby farm is that it's only 15 acres. Like our neighbors, the Vanderlindes, they had like 600 acres, and like dairy cows and beef cows. Anyway, they bought like my mom started out with like 8 rabbits, and she ended up with like 54 rabbits because yeah, she couldn't build hutches fast enough to keep up with their breeding. And Mark, my younger brother, he was just a kid at the time, but it was his job to feed the rabbits, and we harvested the rabbits, and so these rabbits were his pets. He had pet names for them, and so when it was uh, that night to eat rabbit, we would tell him it was chicken instead of his friend Pete or whatever the heck his name was. Anyway, but yeah, so they had a dairy cow which we milked by hand, and they had 3 beef cows that were all a year apart because it took about that long to eat that beef. They had a chest freezer that they would fill all the way up with the beef. And the Vanderlindes would slaughter it for us, and then we would pay them in a quarter of the beef, and then we would keep 3 quarters of the beef. And let's see, what? Oh, they had 2 horses. They had 2 horses. One was broke, one wasn't. And the one that wasn't broke, uh, it would just jump over the fence, and it would leave for 3 days, and it would come back because it was hungry. And there's the main gate for the cattle, and then there was a side gate that we went through, and that's what my dad said. My dad said, "Okay, just take a pail of feed and put it just beyond that small gate. Open the gate up and put it just beyond that small gate." And that was right at the bottom of the barn, and right next to that was the ramp that went up into the hayloft, up to the upper level, where the hay was. And I would hide up there, and I'd watch him. He'd come up to that gate, and he would pace back and forth, and he'd stomp on the ground, and he would snort, and he didn't want to go into that gate, but he had to because he was hungry. And so I'd wait for him. He'd pace back and forth, stomp, and finally he'd go back. He'd go into the gate and start eating, and then I'd run down there and close the gate. But my dad said, "Okay, so the other horse hangs around with this other horse, the one that's broke. If it hangs around with this horse too long, it's going to start being feral too. So your job is to ride this horse." So I did, and we asked our neighbors, the Vanderlands, because they had property along the lake. Could I ride along the lake? And they were like, "Sure, just close the fences. Don't leave any fences. We don't want to let the cows out, right?" So anyway, so that was my job to ride that horse along, and that's what I was doing one day, and I came along. Danny was my age, but his older brother, they were, he had like 4 or 5 older brothers, but one of them wasn't in school, and they were having a kegger. And I came riding up on them, and they're like, "Hey, Tom, what's up? Hey, you want a beer?" And I was 15, and I'd never drank before in my life, and so yeah, I mean, I was like, "Yeah, all right." And I mean, 3, 4 beers, I was drunk, and so I was like, "All right, I better get this horse back." So I was drunk, and I was riding the wrong way with the horse. And what I ended up doing, I got lost. I don't know where I was. I don't even know what I was doing. But I went down in this valley, and it was all like soupy down there. It was all muck. And the horse went so far, and then it stopped. And because I was drunk, when he stopped, I flipped over its head, and I flipped under the mud. And when I landed on the mud, I thought the horse would take off, but the horse didn't. The horse did not take off. And so I got back on the horse, and what I did was I tied the reins in a knot, and I dropped it on the horse's neck. And when the horse felt that, it turned around and started going home. And it took me home. The horse took me home. And when I got home, my mom seen me coming down the driveway, and she immediately knew I was drunk. And she's like, "What have you done?" And she was yelling at me, and she was freaking out. She's like, "You could have killed yourself on this horse." And anyway, and so she says, "You wait till your dad gets home," like that, And so um, during that time, she had called the sheriff, and um, it wasn't very long, like 20 minutes, half hour, I think. But my dad got home, and my room was in the basement. I was down in the basement. He came down there, and he's like, what are you doing?" And he's like, "You're drunk," and I'm like, "She called the cops on me," and he's like, yeah, you're underage, you're drinking." And so the cops came, and they gave me a breathalyzer. Well, not I forget. It wasn't a breathalyzer. I think it was a drunk test. And I failed, and so they brought me to detox, which is in Chanhassen, Minnesota, and so after 3 days, that's as long as they can hold you. They came there and they said, "You're going to go to treatment," because they have a chemical and alcohol treatment center connected to this. It was funny because I was thinking, God, this is the first time I got drunk. I mean, I haven't even developed it, but that's my parents. They were always trying to help me. You know what I mean? So I went through treatment there, and the last 3 weeks of the treatment is a family counseling. And during this time, I had told them about my sister and what happened to my sister and how my mom had dropped her off at the adoption agency. And I said, from then to now, there's this anger growing in me, this resentment against my mother because of what she did to my sister. Because it took my sister a long time to trust her, and in the end, my mother fucked her over. And so the counselor said, "Well, you have to tell her this. You can't carry this around in your heart." And so when it came time for counseling, it was just me and my mom. And so I told her this. I said, "I'm pissed off at you. I'm pissed off at you because of what you did to my sister. You betrayed her. It took her a long time for her to trust you, and you fucked her over. And she started crying, and she said, "Tom, I'm sorry. I didn't know what to do. I said, Mom, I'm sorry too. You know." And so, yeah, yeah. Thank you.